Welcome back to the evolution of horror. My name is Mike Munter, and as ever, I am your host. If you're tuning in for the first time, then welcome. In this podcast, we explore and dissect the history and the evolution of the horror genre by looking at particular subgenres one series at a time. We are currently in the middle of our 7th series exploring the evolution of alien, sci-fi, and cosmic horror, and this is part 14. This week, we're going to be wrapping up exploring the Alien and Predator franchises by talking about a whole bunch of movies. Basically, everything post-Aliens that features a Xenomorph. This week, we're going to be talking Alien 3 from 1992, Alien Resurrection from 1997, Alien vs. Predator from 2004, Alien vs. Predator Requiem from 2007, Prometheus from 2012, and Alien Covenant from 2017. It's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. So I will say spoiler alert for all of those movies, all 6 of them. Even though we do speak about them all quite briefly, we do spoil particular moments, plot points, endings, because you kind of have to. You have to really talk about the ending of Alien 3 in order to talk about the basic plot of Alien 4, etc. So I will say spoiler alert for all 6 of those films before we begin. So joining me through this voyage through the Alien universe, I've got 2 very, very good friends of mine, as well as being 2 of my oldest, bestest pals. They are also the co-hosts of the Journey Through Sci-Fi podcast. They were last here on our Mind and Body series discussing The Fly, and they're back to discuss more sci-fi horror with me. Welcome, Matt and James. Hello, guys.
Hiya, Mike.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. And Matt, I apologize. We were just talking before we started recording, but it seems to be whenever we record together, it's hotter than hell, isn't it? So thank you for being here right now in this absolutely horrendous heat.
Yeah, it is absolutely disgusting. Last time on your show, we did The Fly, and it was roughly a year ago, and we're all drenched in sweat by the end. And we've got a lot of films to cover today, haven't we, Mike? So I think we're going to be dripping in a few hours' time again.
Yeah, I think you schedule it like this to sort of make it more horrific to add to the podcast.
Kind of like we're in like a Xenomorph egg chamber or something, you know, when everything gets all kind of sweaty and tropical.
I feel cocooned, Mike.
Exactly. Oh, God. So now, obviously, we've spoken before about movies that kind of, you know, cross over into sci-fi horror territory. We've done that on your podcast together, and we talked about The Fly last year as well. But obviously, this series in particular, I'm really covering a lot of heavy sci-fi horror stuff. Just in your opinion, Matt, and this is something we've talked about a bit before, but what is it about these 2 genres that always sort of go together so well and complement each other, do you think?
Well, I was thinking about this certainly when watching back the first Alien movie and the second one as well before I got into the films we're doing today. And there's a real like fear of the unknown thing that sci-fi and horror cross over so well on, because, you know, in the vastness of space, not knowing what's out there, you can cover some very specific fears represented by a big penis alien, or you can cover some very like vague existential fears represented by the terrifying vastness of space and your own emotions when staring into the void. You've got this unknown quantities of space that can be funneled into horror with this sci-fi setting. I think that's what makes them work so well together.
Now, we're obviously going to be talking about 6 films here featuring a Xenomorph, right? The Alien world, the Alien franchise. What is it about this creature and this story, James, that, you know, inspires so many films and stories, do you think?
Well, it's just the ultimate killing machine. They refer to it as the perfect killing machine, don't they? And it's just everything about the way it looks. It is literally the epitome of alienness, because it's so different to anything we've seen before. I mean, it's got elements of different kinds of animals and stuff and things you can vaguely recognize, but it's still so foreign but there's something sort of like quite elegant about it as well. But the alien itself is just terrifying because is so sort of otherworldly, and it's sort of like a distorted version of something which you almost know, like everything down to the jaw, the mandible that comes out of its mouth, the extra jaw, and then like the massive tail that will impale you, and the acid blood. It is just terrifying. Everything about it is there to terrify you, and it's just really scary.
It feels possible, you know? It's like this is something that could happen to truckers in space on a long-haul mission, or Marines trying to defend a colony. It feels like this could be a very realistic depiction of what we might find in space. We might not find a grey alien with a big head that speaks perfect English and wants to be our friend. We might find a monster that's like only vaguely familiar and otherwise a perfectly killing machine obsessed with eating our brains, or just cocooning us, whatever it actually does with us when it gets us.
Yes, absolutely horrible. Before we get into the movies we're going to talk about, let me briefly ask you about the first two movies in both these franchises, actually. James, first of all, Alien and Aliens, the original two, are you a fan of those movies?
I mean, of course. We do a science fiction podcast. You have to, to love Alien and Aliens. Like, they're just like two of the most classic science fiction films ever. And like, I was thinking about it the other day, and it's like, in previous like eras, they've had their big fiction things. Like if you look at like the Universal monsters from way back when, and all those sort of like creatures, Alien is kind of our big monster that's been created. It's sort of like the mythos goes down the line. People know about the Alien films when they're younger. They find out about them. Yeah, it has that impact. Just sort of like for horror fans, for sci-fi fans. It's just brilliant stuff.
So good, right? And Matt, what do you think of the way in which, because something we keep talking about, we'll probably talk about more today, is how different these films all are from each other as well. They're all quite distinctive, but particularly Alien and Aliens, right? Is that not like the best example of how good and how different a sequel can be compared to the original, I suppose?
Yeah, and credit to the third and fourth film, they then tried to do that again, stylistically at least. I mean, we'll get into it, but Alien 3, the plot does take a bit of a backward step, but stylistically they really tried to do a different thing every time to varying levels of success. And that's a good thing that Fox did for the series. It didn't pan out in the long run, but you know, they took a chance, well, it's not really a chance, is it? They trusted James Cameron to make an absolute billion-dollar movie like he always does. Not that they knew that then, but still. But they took that diversion and it paid off. So they trusted creative directors to do an interesting new thing each time for two more attempts before it kind of ran its course on that original series.
Matt, am I right in thinking, I remember probably one of the very first conversations we ever had with each other back at uni was how much you love Aliens, right? Isn't that one of your kind of all-time faves?
Yeah. I love James Cameron in general. I think Aliens is his best film. It's one of my favourite films. You know, it's got to be up there with the absolute favourites. My cat's called Ripley.
Yes,
she makes an appearance sometimes. She is like, I mean, she's the polar opposite of her namesake. She's scared of everything, overly curious about things that are dangerous. You know, she's just, hasn't taken after Ripley at all. But I remember when she was a kitten, I watched Aliens with her on my lap, and the later scenes where Newt is going, Ripley! Oh. She was just going mad. She didn't understand what was going on, who was calling her, where they were. She was really freaking out.
James, what about, are you team Alien or Aliens? Which is your favourite of the first two?
Well, I think they go hand in hand, which is a cop-out answer. But
that is a cop-out
answer. Okay, if I'm going with my gut, it's probably Aliens for me. Like, Alien is amazing, but there is something about Aliens that just sort of like ramps it all up another gear for me. And like a random tangent, but I worked on a show with a bunch of improvisers, and the way they always talked about improvising is you start off with like an alien kind of like scenario, and then you make it bigger. So how do you make it bigger? You get more aliens and you do more stuff. So they sort of like, that's what they did with the films for me as well. They sort of started off with this concept. How can we make it better? Or how can we make it different enough so it's not exactly the same sort of formula? We'll just add this on, and we'll add Space Marines, and it will still be as like dark and dank and freaky as it was before, but it will just have that extra layer. So yeah, I think Aliens.
You're going for Aliens as well. Interesting. Okay, well, with all that in mind then, let's begin rattling through the next 6 films in this franchise. We'll go chronologically. We'll say spoiler alert for all of these discussions, but let's begin with David Fincher's Alien 3 from 1992.
It's here. You got Clemens.
Stop this raving at once.
I'm telling you. It's here!
Air and get that foolish woman back to the infirmary!
What is that? Move it! Help me!
So, Alien 3. This is a film from 1992. There are kind of two versions of this, right, which we'll talk about. There is the theatrical cut, then there is the assembly cut. I specifically, this time around, watched the assembly cut. But this was directed by David Fincher, the directorial debut of David Fincher. I think until this point he had done a lot of music videos and TV stuff, but this was his breakthrough into the film industry. It was written by several people, this movie. It was written by David Giler, Walter Hill, Larry Ferguson. The story was originally by Vincent Ward, although it did get kind of changed along the way. It takes place just where Aliens ends, and of course all of our favourite characters from Aliens, that's Ripley, Bishop, Newt and Hicks, all escaped on that escape pod. But as it turns out, as we learn in the opening pre-credit sequence of Alien 3, a facehugger got on board. An alien actually got into their ship when they went into stasis and kills all but Ripley. Ripley then crash lands on this little moon called Fury 161, which is essentially it's a maximum security prison, right? Inhabited by all of these bald men. They're supposed to have some sort of genetic mutation, I think, but they're all rapists, murderers, the kind of the worst people of society. They've also kind of taken these holy orders. They're sorts of monks as well, and they've taken vows of celibacy and all this other stuff. It's all very strange. But anyway, Ripley lands on this moon, but of course an alien lands on this moon with her. The alien face hugs a dog or an ox, depending on which movie you watch. It then bursts out of that, and this kind of four-legged version of the Xenomorph then breaks out and starts killing people. So what we end up with is a kind of very similar format to the first Alien, where we've just got one alien killing off all of these inmates one by one. But what's kind of interesting, I think, the most interesting stuff about this story is that Ripley is awaiting rescue from the company, Weyland-Yutani, and as it turns out, she was impregnated while she was in stasis with a queen. So she discovers she has a queen alien inside her, so her days are numbered. So this is a kind of a very dark and quite tragic end to the Ripley storyline at the end of this movie. But there's a hell of a lot of other stuff going on as well, which we can talk about. But I'm so excited to know what you guys thought of this. Matt, first of all, let me come to you. What do you think of Alien 3?
I'll come right off the bat and say that I loved it. I really, really loved it.
Really?
I really enjoyed watching it. So I've been quietly defending Alien 3 for my entire life. But I would always say I quite like it. I don't think it's that bad. I think it's gets panned a lot. It's unfair. But the reason I've been quietly defending it is because I just haven't rewatched it in years. And I was sort of I might have to really backtrack these comments next time I watch it and then find out it's really terrible. Yeah. I really liked it. I just thought it was really good. It's very messy. And you can see,
so messy.
Yeah, you can see the kind of the fingerprints of the studio just pulling it to bits and really putting David Fincher under a lot of pressure. But I was really impressed with it. I did watch the assembly cut, which I've never seen before. I didn't think it didn't strike me as very different, but I don't remember the original that well. But yeah,
I think it's quite different.
Yeah.
It's about half an hour longer.
Yeah, I read that, and I couldn't really.
And it is a lot.
There's no dog bursters. There's buffalo bursters instead.
Well, I'd read that online before, and that. I don't know, when you read that, it kind of strikes you as that seems like a huge difference. But obviously, when you actually watch it play out, that's one scene. You see it come out of the ox, and then it's exactly the same alien, and the film plays out exactly the same anyway. So I'm not even sure why they changed that bit, to be honest. And actually, I have rewatched the dog scene. The ox scene is much better because it's all a bit smoke and mirrors with the dog, isn't it? You don't actually see what's going on, and then suddenly there's a dead dog and an alien. Clearly it was shot by someone who wasn't Fincher, who came in and did it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that it's called an assembly cut when all the others are director's cuts.
Yeah.
Because Fincher has completely disowned it, hasn't he? He doesn't want anything to do with it because they had so many people from the studio coming in and like changing bits of the script, and they had 6 people working on scripts for this initially, so it's been through so many different changes.
That's how you know it's good.
Yeah, but one of the good things that arose from sort of like all the different changes is one of the guys who wrote for it, David Toohey, he actually started doing a script, and it was about a prison planet. Ripley goes to a prison planet and there's aliens involved, and that later became Pitch Black. So knowing that sort of makes me enjoy this a little bit more as well, knowing that it sort of spawned that from these early scripts for Alien 3. And like at one point they had one where it was about a cult in a forest and they were exorcising the alien from these people, and it's just like so many crazy scripts were made. They were going to go to Earth with Hicks and Newt, and that was sort of like the original bit, and then they even did a poster apparently where it was on Earth, no one can hear you scream.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. All of these, and then it just continued not to make sense. And I mean, they didn't even have a full script, did they, when they started filming?
Yeah, they didn't. No, that was what really pissed off Fincher, is that he was literally filming stuff without a script, so everything kept changing. I think originally Vincent Ward's idea was this, which is the movie that I think so many fans really wanted and wished that we had seen, which was this idea of it was all on a sort of wooden planet where everything was kind of medieval, and you know, but it was kind of too grand, too ambitious apparently in what he was envisioning, and it all just ended up as this kind of strange mishmash of what they could put together at that point with no script, because it was essentially an early example of the studio basically coming up with a release date before actually having a movie, which happens quite a lot these days. But this was one of the earliest examples of that, because Aliens was so popular. Fox were like, this is when Alien 3 will be released, and they refused to budge on that. So everything just kind of got sort of concertinaed as they had no script, no story, and all of these kind of disparate sort of people involved changing their minds about things. So it's amazing that it came together at all, really, I suppose. James, what do you think of Alien 3?
I mean, I like the concept of it in the way that like Ripley is going to a planet full of all these men who are basically in prison. So Ripley is this strong female character, and suddenly she's surrounded by all these thirsty men. So like I like that as an idea to start off with, and I quite like the prison planet. I think it does get messy, but I think the overall sort of the look and tone of it fits with an Alien film in terms of sort of like it's dark and dank and claustrophobic, and the whole film feels
bleak.
like that. Yeah. So it's like
Yeah.
they're onto sort of like the right thing with that, and I like the idea that it's a convict planet and all this kind of stuff to make it more remote, and there's less chance of people saving them.
I love that they take that concept one step further to make it even more bleak, which is it's a convict planet, but everybody who's there is there voluntarily. The actual prison facility has been closed down, and these guys have like found God and chosen to stay working this. It's a foundry that makes lead sheets that store toxic waste. Everything is so grim, like down to the very details of what they're even there to do. It's so much more grim than just a prison. It's horrible.
It's so bleak. And you can see why people were disappointed, I think, especially people that were huge fans of Aliens, who then, you know, didn't get the characters they love come back from Aliens, but then also it's tonally so... Aliens is kind of fun, right? And it really kind of zips along with lots of kind of zingy one-liners, and it's got loads of action and all those monsters, all those kind of, you know... all those Marines and everything. I don't know, the tone of this one is just much more kind of bleak and oppressive.
It's not doing the aliens thing. So like, how do you improve on Aliens? You strip it all back and then put it on a prison planet. They haven't really got to that next stage, have they?
Yeah, and I kind of respect that in a way where it's like, maybe you can't go any bigger than Aliens, so let's do something different again. And I understand that. And I've never been a fan of Alien 3, but it's been a long time since I'd seen it. I remember watching it, maybe I was at school, and I hated it. I thought it was so boring. I just remember thinking, it's just loads of miserable like men who all look exactly the same. I couldn't really tell who's who, what's going on, and I just thought it was all a bit boring and bleak. But I was really excited to give it a rewatch, because I know this movie has its defenders. Like, Matt, I'm glad you've been really positive about it. So many people have tweeted me saying, you know, Alien 3 is the most underrated film in the series. I know this movie has its defenders, right? I know people love it. They all say to me, oh, make sure you watch the assembly cut. The assembly cut is, you know, one of the best movies in the series, blah, 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 blah. So fine, I sat down, I rewatched it, I watched the assembly cut, and it was better than I remember. There's still stuff about it that I hate, but there was stuff about it that I really liked. For example, I think Ripley, this is an excellent Ripley film, right? I think that Ripley's story here and her arc and the way that her arc kind of concludes is excellent. And I think maybe Sigourney Weaver gives her best performance in the series in this movie. Everything to do with Ripley and her kind of emotional arc, I found super compelling. But while I think this is an excellent Ripley film, I think it's a terrible Alien film. I think that the horror just doesn't work for me. I think it's kind of naff. I think the alien looks really bad in this one. There's that terrible CGI, sort of early 90s CGI. There's none of the tension or suspense of the first two Alien movies. I don't feel any sense of peril from this alien. I feel more peril from these bald monks. And, you know, that's something different they were going for. I get it, but I think that the bald monks are all kind of boring. I think that annoying sort of corridor chase at the end in the final act that goes on way too long, where the alien is like crawling up on the ceiling and picking off the monks, I just thought was really rubbish. There was nothing compelling about it as an alien horror movie for me. And as much as I love Ripley in this movie, I think everything else that makes it an alien film doesn't work. So I think it's a kind of 50% a good film and 50% a terrible mess.
Yeah, I think also because you are the horror guy as well, it's taken elements of those horror bits away, and it's still sort of like, you can still see it as a sci-fi, and it's like it's on an alien planet, blah blah blah, but it hasn't got that kind of like tension, like you say. It's got moments of it, but it's more sort of like, here's the alien, we put him in a We've sealed him off. We're going to do this. We're going to try and do that. It's not the kind of like, it's coming for you. It's coming for you. Where is it? It's going to get you kind of bit.
I feel like people like this movie despite the alien, right? Which is an interesting thing because it's an alien film. But yeah, I guess it kind of, you guys are doing a dystopian series next on your podcast, aren't you? And I guess this kind of it feels quite dystopian, doesn't it, Matt, in a way?
Well, I thought that watching all of these films, that actually all of the first four films are dystopian movies. Like the omnipresent company, Weyland-Yutani, is very much a dystopian controlling entity. They've taken over all of society, it seems. They're controlling shipping. They've got significant influence over the military. They have private prisons that they're running. What don't they do? And the way they just sacrifice human life, for this pursuit of their financial goals. That's totally dystopian. But I did think, like, watching this, that like you said, Alien 3 is a good Ripley movie. But the Ripley story is very much the Ripley and Weyland-Yutani story, and it's a very good Weyland-Yutani story as well. And watching it, I really felt like it was a good end to a trilogy that was following Ripley's story. But you're right, that the alien stuff isn't as good. The interesting alien in Alien 3 is the one you don't see till the end, the one that's inside Ripley. And it's really about her story. And she gets this amazing, like, she has everything taken from her by this terrifying beast and this evil employer that she's got. And just right at the end, she loses everything and she dies, but she gets to, like, stick one in the eye of the company and the aliens by seemingly annihilating all the aliens and removing them from the company's grasp.
Yeah, and Fincher gets to stick one in the eye for Fox by killing off their main characters. They can't do any more Alien sequels.
Yeah, it's so true. Kills off their villain and their hero in one fell swoop. Yeah, it's so true. And you're right, like, those moments with Weyland-Yutani, and like the when she gets the scan and discovers she's got an alien, like, that is a chilling scene, isn't it? And then the communication with the company, who really you only see via a computer for most of the film, right? And they're just like, basically just don't want to help anyone. They want her to come back with the alien, and that's it. And there's no negotiating about it. That's the scary stuff in Alien.
Because the fact she's got that alien inside her is a bit like she's got a terminal illness. And it's like, it could strike at any time, but it feels like it's not really used to its advantage in the film, because that's the really interesting thing. Like, it could happen. It's gonna happen at some point, but you don't know when.
Yeah, it takes absolutely ages compared to the established life cycle of a chest burster in the first two films. But all of those things are very much up for grabs across these
wildly
films.
inconsistent. Yeah. I know, which we'll get into. It's true. I give it the benefit of the doubt because I thought, well, maybe because it's a queen, it's bigger and it takes longer to grow or something.
Sure.
You know? Why not? Sure.
Yeah, I'll accept that.
Yeah, why not? So overall, I mean, would you? So it sounds as though you guys would recommend Alien 3 though to people.
Strongly.
Matt, you're a
Strongly.
fan of
Yeah.
it by the sounds of it.
Yeah. Strongly recommend it and definitely next time I watch Alien and Aliens, I'll be making a point of watching Alien 3 as well and viewing it as a trilogy.
James, what about you? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I like them as a trilogy. I mean, it's not as strong for me. There's lots of, like, obviously it's a mess in terms of sort of like the scripting and everything and the storyline, but I still like the general vibe of Alien 3. So, yeah. In terms of sequels, it's all right.
Who knew Charles Dance could be so kind of young and hunky as well? I was like, oh my God, look at Charles Dance.
Sorry, did you think he looked young and hunky?
I think he looked quite young and hunky for Charles Dance, didn't it? No,
I thought it was very odd that they had sex, that he was like the closest thing to a romantic lead for Ripley.
And then he just gets killed. Again, it's so bleak because he's like the one nice guy in that film, and then you're like, oh God, he's gone by midway through. And just the fact that the whole last act is just about her trying to kill herself, basically. It's like, it's such a bleak movie, isn't it?
And they've all got nits as well, haven't they? They've all got bloody nits and lice.
The detail, the bleak, grim detail is so good. The lice.
The lice. And it has got that, obviously, one of the most iconic shots in the whole franchise, isn't it? Where Ripley is kind of recoiling as the Xenomorph comes right up to her face. It's one of the most famous shots in the whole series, really.
And you were saying the CGI is bad, and the CGI is bad, but there is a lot of good practical alien stuff in it. They do retain that, and that's a nice alien puppet leaning in on Ripley in that scene.
It's true. It's true. There are some very cool moments in this strange mess of a film. So there you go. That's Alien 3. Let's move on to the next Alien film, 1997's Alien Resurrection.
Who are you?
Ripley Ellen, Lieutenant First Class, number 36706.
Ellen Ripley died 200 years ago. You're a thing, a construct. They grew you in a lab.
What the hell is going on here?
He is breeding an alien species.
Wish you could understand what we're trying to do here.
Now they brought it out of you.
Not all the way out.
You want to tell us what this is?
It's a queen. She'll breed. You'll die.
Directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who is, what a strange choice, right, for a director for an Alien movie. He'd previously to this done Delicatessen and City of Lost Children, and then obviously famously since then he's directed Amélie as well. So this kind of quirky French director. And it's directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, and it's written by Joss Whedon. So a weird mix of people involved in this one. Matt, give us a brief plot synopsis of Alien Resurrection.
The plot of Alien Resurrection is what you thought you wanted at the end of Alien 3, which is Ripley's dead. What happens if the company gets their hands on the aliens, and then how will that go for them? That's the basic plot. And then it doesn't go to plan in terms of making a good movie or harnessing the aliens as a weapon. So Ripley is cloned. Ripley is awoken as a clone because she has the alien in her chest at the end of Alien 3. They know it's a queen because Ripley said it was a queen. No one knows how Ripley knew it was a queen. Doesn't matter. She's brought back. They extract the alien queen and so that they can breed some aliens as weapons. They're not the company, it's the government. I don't know why they made that decision. But it's functionally the same in the film. And then everything goes wrong, right? That's the basic plot. The aliens get out and they start killing everyone on the ship. And Ripley has to help the crew of the Serenity to defeat them.
Is it the Serenity? Okay, I was like, for a second, I was like, that's a weird coincidence.
It's a cookie cutter crew from the Serenity,
actually,
isn't it? You've got Jane in there. You've got whatever Summer Glau's character is. I can't remember. They're exactly like the Serenity.
It's so true. So, James, let me ask you first. You said that this was one you had strong memories of growing up. What do you think of Alien Resurrection?
Oh, I bloody love it. It's it's absolutely mental, but I love it. I don't know why, but it's just like there's so much of it that I just vividly remember, like I said at the start. But because it is just so weird and wacky and doesn't necessarily feel like an alien film, it's just like there's something about it which I just really love. Like it's so bizarre. Like everything from the human hybrid alien that you see towards the end.
Yes.
Which is just like horrendous looking and like makes weird gurgling noises, and like everything is just so like, and the guy in the wheelchair, he pulls out the guns and stuff, and it's just like
really weird.
I can't even, there's so many bits in this film that I've just like, when I'm talking about it, I'm just remembering bits and pieces. But one of the bits I really loved was when you saw the aliens in the water. That was a bit which I really enjoyed.
Yes!
And I think that was like all over the promotion, all over the trailers, because it's one of the best bits in the film, really. You've got swimming aliens, and we've never seen swimming aliens before. Come on, that's worth watching on just for that.
I love it. And then they emerge in that pool that's like filled with the eggs and the face huggers. Love it. Matt, what about you? Sounds as though you're not quite so keen on Alien Resurrection.
No, I was pleasantly surprised. I think it's pretty silly, but it doesn't. It's very unpretentiously silly. I think is that, I don't know, is that fair? Yeah, it's, you know, it doesn't take itself too seriously. It's quite a fun film. There's like 4 really great scenes that are strung together with some pretty silly stuff. But yeah, it's worth it. That swimming scene is amazing. There's a bit where Dan Hedaya like scoops out a bit of his own brain after being killed by an alien.
Love it.
There's some good like gory horror.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's more than the sum of its parts, I guess.
I feel like Jean-Pierre just didn't know anything about Alien, was like, okay, so there's a big monster and I'm going to do stuff in this spaceship with him and just see how it goes and just do what I want.
Yeah, it kind of feels like a mad fan fiction or something, doesn't it? Like, how do we bring back
totally
Ripley
does.
and you know, create this new story? It doesn't feel like the whole series of all 6 we're going to talk about. It feels like the one that really kind of sticks out like a sore thumb the most, doesn't it? Out of all of them, it's really weird. Yeah,
doesn't it feel like it like a book, like
Yes.
a spin-off book that you would pick up in like W.H. Smith's and be like, oh, an alien book. What's this about? And then read the synopsis and just be like, what the fuck?
But I kind of love it. I'm with James as well. Like, I always enjoyed this one more than Alien 3. I think I just prefer the sillier tone. It is trashier. I don't even know if it's a better film than Alien 3, but I think it's a more enjoyable one. And I actually quite like the sort of weird Ripley clone in this, and how different Sigourney Weaver gets to be in this movie as well. She gets to be a bit more sinister and a bit weirder, and I like all of the weird, crazy, wacky characters. I think Winona Ryder's really good in this as well as the android, and the aliens on the whole are quite fun as well, apart from the terrible newborn thing at the end. That is terrible.
And he gets sucked out of a tiny hole. That's the best bit.
Absolutely horrendous.
I still like, every time I think about that, it's just like, it's just so mad.
I will say, like, to play devil's advocate for the newborn, it is really stupid, but it is continuing a trend that James Cameron established in Aliens, which is in each film they create a new type of beast that is part of the alien life cycle or whatever. Like James Cameron created the Queen, and now we introduce that. David Fincher's film introduced the idea that the alien will be different depending on what its host is, with the dog alien or ox alien. And now Jean-Pierre Jeunet is saying that if you clone a woman who had an alien in it, then it'll create an alien queen that gives birth through a womb. It was really disgusting.
So good, so good.
To a half alien, half human thing.
I love it. I love this kind of weird hybrid of the humans and aliens in this, because obviously Ripley bleeds acid blood in this movie as well, doesn't she? And all that kind of stuff. So I think there's some interesting spins on it. And I guess for better or worse, right? This is the first... compared to Alien 3, this is exactly the movie it always wanted to be. Like, for better or worse, I think this is exactly what Jean-Pierre Jeunet wanted. Like, there was the intro to it. I watched all the quadrilogy, and each one had the director intro, apart from David Fincher, because he disowned it. But this one was like, yes, here's a director's cut, but for the director's cut, all I did was change the opening credits to something a bit more flashy. But other than that, you're seeing exactly the film that I wanted to make. This is exactly how I wanted it to be and stuff, which is quite funny, which is kind of a first, really, in this series.
He's just owning it, isn't he? He's fully aware of everything that it is. He's like, I'm just rolling with it. Like, this is the film I wanted to do. Have it.
Bonkers. Matt, you mentioned Firefly. Like, can you tell that this is a Joss Whedon script?
Yeah, do you not think that the, is it called the Betty, the actual ship, I think it's called?
Yeah.
Do you not think the crew is just a proto-Firefly crew? Like, they're kind of on the edges of the law. They'll work with the government if it serves them. Well, I guess Mal never would, but they'll work with some shady characters if it serves their purposes. But they've got some vague morals that they'll stick to, and there's a bunch of colourful characters. And,
definitely,
yeah,
definitely, you're absolutely right. And there's that kind of quippy dialogue in this as well. Like there's a line at one point when somebody says to Ripley, "Oh, well, you faced this thing. How did you beat it?" And she's like, "I died." And I thought that is such a Buffy line. In fact, I think Buffy herself said that at one point.
Yeah.
One of the things I want to talk about as well is the weird sexual tension between Ripley and the human alien thing that she's kind of given birth to.
Sexual tension.
Well, it felt like quite sexual as well. I know it's supposed to be maternal, but she's properly like rubbing him up and down and this kind of thing.
Yeah, it's quite
And he's
weird.
like,
yeah,
like there's lots of that, and she's like. She's touching all the aliens up and things like that because she's a little bit alien herself now. And she's like, she can see something. And as we're doing this podcast, Mike has a picture of the human hybrid as his background on Zoom. And it is just horrendous. And just imagining Sigourney Weaver touching that now, it's not nice.
They get very close, don't they? They do get very close. It's also got that iconic basketball shot, right? Where she slam dunks in one take, which is awesome as well.
She did that first take, apparently, but then everyone was so surprised they all just burst into laughter. So they had to shoot it again and again and again. But
yeah, and that's why there is that slightly weird cut. Like as soon as she slam dunks it, there's just a really quick cut to some reactions rather than letting it linger. But that is awesome, isn't it? I think you can actually watch on YouTube like the outtake of that and hear everyone cheer and laugh after she does it.
I mean, it's so gifable.
It was cool to see Sigourney Weaver do something a bit different. But again, I can see that a lot of fans didn't like that it wasn't I mean, it's not Ripley, really, is it? It's some other weird man-made thing. Oh, also, my favourite set piece is the moment when she goes and sees all the different clones as well.
Yes.
Like the first 7 or whatever it is clones. Amazing. So good.
And
Gross.
like you were saying, they kind of like instead of Hicks, they've got Winona Ryder in that sort of like almost the same sort of character. She's probably more like, who is she more like? She feels like a character from the earlier ones.
She's more like Bishop, I guess, isn't she?
Yeah. But she's like the progression of sort of Bishop, isn't like she's compassionate and
a bit Newt too, right? She's a sort of daughter figure a bit as well. There's a bit of both there. Well,
I quite like the way that Ripley is not tender with her at all. Like when she's forcing her to interface with Father. It's called Father now. That was very unclever sort of twist.
It's so stupid.
But the way she's like forcing her to interface with it, and she's just like, well, deal with it, toughen up, come on, we're plugging you in. I felt like that actually bothered me quite a bit with the film. Actually, is that Ripley, she's maternal to the aliens, but she's kind of lost that maternal instinct. And there's a line where she says she can't even remember Newt's name. She's aware that there was a girl, but she can't even remember her. And I thought that was really cruel. And like, I've never accepted the criticism of Alien 3. That they killed off Newt and Hicks and therefore it's a bad film.
No.
Like, I love Aliens to bits, but I'm just not bothered. It's a different film. It just doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I agree.
But I never hear anyone saying, well, no one really talks about Alien Resurrection that much, but I never hear anyone saying, like, what a cruel thing it was to rob Ripley, the Ripley clone, of even remembering who Newt is. Is that not even worse than killing her off, to then just erase her from Ripley's mind?
Yeah, it's kind of like trolling the audience a bit, that line, isn't it? It does feel a bit like that. But again, I think it's just so... I don't know, there's something about it that feels so sort of deliberate, and everything in this movie, the tone is just that little bit campier and sillier. And I think you just have to not take it as Ripley and almost not take it as an Alien film in a weird way. It's really weird, isn't it? It's set like 200 years after the original as well, or something, after Alien 3 as well, isn't it, or something. But and this is also the first film where we finally see Earth as well. What did you guys think of the ending? Kind of the ending of the timeline, right? Which is that they crash land on a sort of dystopian Earth.
Yeah.
I think in Paris, isn't it?
But you watched the special edition. James, did you watch the special edition?
I saw the bit with the Paris. You can tell it's Paris.
Yeah, but I've got a feeling in the theatrical cut you don't see Earth.
Oh, okay. I don't
think
know.
they might have the same dialogue on the ship as it's entering the atmosphere, and that's like the only sort of significant change in it. So that's really interesting that Fox in particular, if you look at it from a studio point of view, Fox were like, we don't want to have destroyed Earth. Like Ron Perlman says, "Earth, what a shithole," earlier in the film, but he doesn't say, "Earth, what a shithole, it's a post-apocalyptic wasteland." Like,
Yeah.
So they kept their cards to their chest on that one a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Again, quite a sort of weird, bleak ending, and it kind of felt as though that was the end, didn't it? I mean, in the same way that Alien 3 felt like that should have been the end, again, Alien Resurrection felt like that was it. They weren't doing a thing where they were sort of like, ooh, we'll set up another film or anything. It was very much like, the aliens are dead, they've made it back to Earth, that's it kind of thing, I guess.
There is a book out there if you're interested. I haven't read it, but there's a book that follows, there's two, I think they've done 2 books following Ripley 8, which establishes that Paris is only destroyed because they crashed into it, because the Auriga, or whatever it's called, the Auriga crashed into it, and then they've got a whole narrative following Ripley 8 on Earth.
There you go. So there you go. That was Alien Resurrection. Also, shout out to Brad Dourif as well, who I love, who obviously plays Chucky, Killer Chucky in the series, but he's the scientist in this movie.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's
so good, right? At that moment when he's all cocooned and he's like, a beautiful baby and all that. It's like, why is he suddenly gone all mad and deranged and evil? It's so weird, but yeah.
I think he always was.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. So there you go. That's the absolutely insane Alien Resurrection. Oh, God. Right. Now we're hurtling into a dip, aren't we? Okay, so Alien versus Predator from 2004.
7 days ago, one of my satellites over Antarctica discovered a pyramid.
Where exactly on the ice is this?
It's not on the ice. It's 2,000 feet under it. Let's make history.
Oh my God.
Whoever built this pyramid believed in ritual sacrifice.
Did you hear that?
So there's a group of scientists which have found this pyramid underneath the ice somewhere
in the Antarctica.
Yeah. So they found this pyramid and they're like, okay, we're going to dig in there. There's like a big hole there for some reason. They don't know why there's a hole. So they're going to go and have a look in the hole, have a look at the pyramid. So they're off on their adventures, and then they find this big pyramid and they find out that predators have been taking alien eggs and have been putting them in pyramids to have big, like, hunting games. And basically these stupid scientists have ended up in the middle of one of their hunting games in the Antarctic.
Fantastic. Yeah. Good job at that synopsis. So let me ask you before we get onto this film, because I forgot to ask you, are you guys Predator fans in general? I mean, last week on the podcast we did Predator 1 and 2. Matt, are you a fan generally of the Predator movies?
I only really like the first one. Like, the second one's pretty good, and I think they're all pretty good after that, but like kind of forgettable after that. Like, and I think it just like it hasn't got the staying power of the Alien films, because the first Predator movie I think is really good, but it's just not that interesting. Like, it's a good film.
It's kind of a beautifully sort of simple one and done premise, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
James, what about you? Are you a Predator fan generally?
I really love the Predator films. Like the first two, I really love. Like, I don't know what it is about them, but I just love it as a concept that you've got this alien who comes down and he's just hunting people, and he's kind of humanoid, but he's got all this special tech and stuff, and it's like I love it. Like, I love the Predator as an alien creature as well. And like, I've read lots of the fiction stuff from sort of like the Alien versus Predator stuff as well. So yeah, I really like the Predator as a character.
Yeah, much more kind of technologically advanced, right, than the Xenomorph and all that kind of stuff. I guess that's the main difference between them, isn't it? So Alien versus Predator then. So this was obviously written and directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. What a legend. Matt, let me ask you first of all, what do you think of Alien versus Predator?
Again, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was okay. I think it's, it's almost as probably equal to Alien Resurrection for me. I had a good time watching it. This is a fun film.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with that, actually. I kind of thought it was more fun than I remember. It's kind of, if you watch it almost as like a sort of It reminds me a bit of a film like The Mummy, maybe, or something like a kind of action-adventure movie, a kind of silly early 2000s action-adventure movie or something like that. It's kind of fine. James, what about you? What do you think of Alien vs. Predator?
I hate this film. I absolutely hate it. I have so many issues with this, and this is one of the reasons I disliked Paul W.S. Anderson after I saw this. Because, like I said, I read lots of the stuff beforehand. My mate Nick was like a big Alien and Predator fan, and he gave me a book. And it was like basically the book which should have been the story for this film. And it was so good. It's like it's based on like a series of comics where they had the Aliens versus the Predators, the Dark Horse comics released. And it's basically, the original idea is it's set on this sort of like cattle ranch planet. And you've got this really great character called Machiko Noguchi, and she's a sort of she's like a company businesswoman, and then she ends up in this sort of like fight between the aliens and predators because the aliens have like taken over this cattle ranch, and the predators have to come down, and then she sort of like ingratiates herself with one of the predators, and it's just really good. Like, it's a really strong story, and this had elements of that. But it just completely fucked it up for me. Like, there's so much stuff. Like, I don't know. Because also, Aliens versus Predators should be such a good thing. Because Predators, their whole point of existence is they hunt stuff. And the ultimate prey would be the aliens. So it's an amazing premise. It's just, I'm so disappointed that they just didn't execute it well. Like, they could have done so much with this. But it just sort of turns into these scientists wandering around this pyramid, getting lost, and then there's predators finding their weapons, getting killed, and then there's a big queen at the end. It's just like, come on, you could have done so much more.
James, in the books, what's the established like connection between the aliens and the predators? Because I actually liked the idea that they were like farming aliens on our planet, maybe other planets, for the purpose of hunting. Like, why are they coming to this cattle ranch? What's the premise of why they come together and fight?
Well, I think so. Basically, they do exactly what they do in the film. Like, they find planets, they put aliens there, and then they come back on their hunting trips when the time is right. But then this colony has accidentally set up a colony on this place where the alien eggs are. So again, great idea for a premise, and it's like, could totally work. It's just they didn't have enough in this for me.
Do you think the problem with it is that, I know a lot of people, you know, what they really disliked about it was its kind of PG-13ness as well, that this was, you know, when it came out in cinemas here in the UK, it was a 12A, in America it was a PG-13. They'd really toned down the horror and toned down the gore in comparison to the early Predator and Alien films. Matt, was that a problem for you at all watching this?
No, not at all. I'm surprised that was a criticism, because I mean, now you mention it, the violence is low, but I thought some of the action was really good. The first major fight between a predator and an alien, I actually thought looked really cool. You know, where they're in the kind of set, like a little crossroads inside the pyramid, and they just have a brawl. He catches the alien in like his what is it, like a laser net of some kind?
I like that, because that Xenomorph has the laser net mark on it throughout the rest of the film, doesn't it? Yeah,
I thought that was a pretty cool fight scene. But now I'm replaying scenes in my head, and like there's no good violence, really, is there? It's very action, like video game.
You don't care about any of these characters either. You don't care about the scientists. No, like, even the lead character, Sana Lathan, who plays Alexa Woods, like, she is basically playing the Noguchi character from the book. But yeah, they just don't do enough with her. And then you don't, like, there's so many scientists introduced at the start, and they're all just fodder. They're just like all going to get killed within the first 5 minutes.
This is something I think we'll probably talk about more and more throughout the rest of this series, but the human characters just get more and more just like cardboard cutout idiots, don't they, basically, that are just fodder. But yeah, that's true. I mean, like, they don't really know what to do with these human characters. And it's kind of just like, let's just get straight to the alien fun, which is fair enough. Paul W.S. Anderson. So, and you said, Matt, he was, you know, it looked kind of video gamey, and obviously that's that's his thing, right? I love, just FYI, when you go onto his Wikipedia page, the top line it says underneath his name is not to be confused with Paul Thomas Anderson. It's like that's the only way people come across him. Yeah, did you mean? But yeah, obviously this is the guy who 2 years before this had directed Resident Evil, and then he's basically helmed the whole Resident Evil series, and that's kind of what he's famous for. But also in the 90s made Event Horizon, right, which we've talked about on your podcast and I'm going to talk about on this podcast soon. But that's a great film, right? I mean, we all love Event Horizon. That's brilliant. So he knows how to do a good film when he wants to, and I think visually he's great. I mean, Resident Evil movies look really cool. So I think... And this movie, I think, actually looks really cool. I really like some of the cool lighting and the production design, but I think the story just feels too slight and too rushed, and the characters aren't good enough, so it all just feels like a bit of a mess. But I think... clearly Paul W.S. Anderson, right, is somebody that favours visuals maybe over story.
Yeah, I mean, there are like visuals which have come from the comics as well, like the Queen with the sort of like the eggs coming out, and then sort of like the chamber which sort of like deals with those. All of that kind of stuff they're doing sort of trying to do fan service with that, but but the whole thing it doesn't work for me.
One of the things I found, this is something that Chris Hewitt talked about when we talked about Aliens, is like what's so brilliant about the first two movies is how kind of deliberately paced it is, like how it really takes its time and builds that suspense before we meet the aliens and before anything really horrific happens and before the action kicks off. Whereas this movie, it feels like in the first 5 minutes, it's like we're straight into like aliens and predators fighting each other and stuff. And again, it doesn't really spend any time with the characters. And there are certain set pieces, like there's a moment when two characters have to like dive through a tunnel because the ceiling's coming down, and it feels very much like a kind of action adventure, almost like Tomb Raider style like set piece.
Well,
and
the film sort of turned into Cube by that point.
It is.
Pyramid shifting every 10 minutes.
It looks a bit like Cube, actually, doesn't it? But yeah, like again, I feel like some of those scenes could have actually been really good and suspenseful if he'd taken a bit longer on them. But that scene that I was just talking about is over in about 7 seconds. It's like they get through it and then it's on to the next set piece. And it's like, I think for me, it's all just a bit rushed, and it's not taking the time to spend that, build that suspense or spend that time building that world or all these characters or all these monsters,
I think it's about who you're rooting for as well, because it's so heavily slanted towards the predators, because obviously they're more humanoid looking, so you want them to be sort of like the protagonists, but there's not enough of the predators still sort of like being predators, and like they're dangerous and they will kill you as well. It just like, it seems like it's all just slanted towards the aliens are the bad guys, the serpents, watch out for them. There's not enough of this, like, they're both very scary things from another planet.
That's true, right? Do you think they kind of had to make the predators in a way the good guys? Like, Matt, did you find that when you watched it? Like, they basically had to make the aliens the baddies and the predators the goodies in a way.
Yeah, but like it was never going to be any other way, was it? There's no treatment for an Alien versus Predator film where you're siding with the aliens, I don't think. Right? That would be incredibly hard to do.
But I think you should have had predators which were a bit more like, they're just very one-sided, like they're definitely the goodies in this. Whereas if they're sort of like, they have that other edge, because that's what they had in the comics and stuff, like they would kill humans as well, just like if they got in their way, they don't care. I don't feel like there was enough of that in this. It just very quickly got up to the point where there's a good predator and he's working with the lead character and they're gonna like save the day.
It's very funny when they're side by side, isn't it? It just looks very silly. And like when she's got the alien head as a shield and the spear, and then when they ride up on the sled side by side, it's very funny. You can't team up a human and a predator.
Yeah, like when you think about, this was the terrifying thing that was skinning people and going up against Arnie in Predator 1, and it's like, what has happened now all of a sudden?
Well, I mean, in the original books and comics, they did, like, Noguchi does team up with one of the predators, but there's more of a lead up to it, and it's kind of like they establish more of a connection and stuff because there's lots of stuff going on. But this just seems very forced and quick, and here's your alien head shield and let's go on a sled, like, too quick.
Oh yeah, the head shield. Yeah, because the predators do have those kind of sort of morals and things, don't they? Like, even Predator 2 ends with them sort of letting Danny Glover live, doesn't it? And they give him a weapon or whatever, and they sort of honour him almost at the end of the film, don't they? So I guess there is that element of the Predators, but yeah.
Well, it's that element of Predator 2 is why the Predators are the good guys here, isn't it? You've established that that higher level of thinking from the Predators, which... We didn't talk about this when we were just doing Resurrection, but it really bothered me when they were trying to like anthropomorphize the alien intelligence. Like, they can press buttons now.
Oh, yeah.
Like, because they've seen it. It's just not like there's a difference between like a Pavlovian response to a button and being scared of it, and then like pushing the button with your tongue. But anyway, we're done with that film. But like, they've established that kind of high level reasoning in the Predators. That's why there are de facto heroes in lieu of any interesting human characters.
It's about what's scary as well, and the scary thing is you've got this creature which is so primal and so sort of like, it's just vicious and you can't control it. You don't know what its thoughts are because it's just so base in its instincts. And I feel like this and the other sequels we talked about so far, they've kind of taken that away,
watered it down, haven't they, bit by bit. It's so true. Yeah, I mean, at this point you can't even really call this a horror movie, really. It's a sort of action, almost comic booky movie, isn't it, by this point? So there you go. Anything else anyone want to mention on Alien vs Predator before we move on to the next masterpiece?
I mean, do we need to acknowledge the fact that there's a whole Ancient Aliens subplot here? Because that's going to come up later in this podcast, right?
Yeah, actually, this is true. And obviously, this may or may not end up being canon when we talk about the prequels, but this idea that these eggs have been here in the Antarctic for however long, right? And this is the first Alien film set on Earth, isn't it, entirely as well?
Yeah,
and in the present day for when it was made. It's set in 2004,
You've got
isn't it?
Wayland's granddad, haven't you, or something like that?
Oh yeah, because Lance Henriksen's in this, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to tie it to Prometheus, then presumably Lance Henriksen would be Guy Pearce's dad, I think.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Roughly, given their ages.
Although
maybe granddad.
Although I think Ridley Scott was very clear that, like, no, Alien vs Predator is not canon and part of this.
Ridley Scott doesn't get to pick and choose which films are canon to his films.
Ridley Scott makes a lot of decisions, which we'll talk about. So yeah, I think that's fair enough.
I think you'll find the Fox company gets to decide which movies are canonical.
Yes, or Disney now.
Or now Disney, yeah.
Yeah.
So none of them at this point.
There you go. So that's Alien vs Predator. Let's go. I mean, surely it can only be uphill from there, right? Let's talk about the next one. Alien vs Predator Requiem.
Some came after us. What came after us? I don't know. Hold on! The town was completely overrun. What's the Army's evacuation?
Alien vs Predator Requiem. So this came out a couple of years later. This is 2007, directed by the brothers Strauss, who I believe until this point had only really directed music videos, and written by Shane Salerno. Matt, what's the story of Alien vs Predator Requiem?
So we neglected to mention the cliffhanger ending of Alien vs Predator, which is that...
Oh, of course.
The main Predator... is taken away. He dies defeating the alien queen, and he's taken away by his comrades. And on the ship outbursts the predator alien. And I'm not going to be referring to it as a pred-alien.
I'm sure that's the technical term.
It is the technical term, and I'm just not a fan of that.
Predalien. A predalien.
A predator alien.
A predalien.
That bursts out of his chest, and then the plot of Alien vs Predator Requiem is that that predator alien causes the ship to crash, along with some eggs, which land in small town America. The eggs breed aliens, the predator alien goes on a rampage, the aliens go on a rampage, and then the town is nuked.
The end. This was the first time I'd ever seen this film. I never watched it back in the day, so first time watch for me this week.
Lucky you.
Oh my God. I think it might be the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. But let me come to you guys first.
Wow, that's strong, because you've seen a lot of bad films as well.
Honestly, like, not only was it just total bollocks, like the whole story, but I've never seen anything less competently directed in my life. Like, you can't see anything. Why is it so badly shot and lit and edited? I literally couldn't see what was going on in the last half of the movie. I just thought it was atrocious. But anyway, James, what did you think of AVP Requiem?
Well, in my notes, I just put 3 letters. I put P-O-O.
Yeah.
But yeah, this film, it's like, it doesn't know what it wants to be. Like, it's basically trying to be a teen horror film, isn't it?
Yes,
it's like,
yes.
Let's have like the jock, and there's a Marine who's come back from war, and there's all these like characters which they introduce really quickly, like, and there's this family and blah blah blah, and then there's a homeless guy, and then bit by bit they were all taken down by the alien with braids.
Yeah,
like that's it, isn't it?
Yeah,
the Predalien, yeah. And when we talk about Alien Resurrection, I said it feels like the director didn't really care too much about the Alien films in terms of like he doesn't want to stick exactly to it. This feels like they've never seen Alien or Aliens or Predator
or any film ever. Yeah.
No, it feels like they've just like got a beat sheet of how a slasher film should be, and just chucked on a few things, and it's a mess, isn't it?
Oh my God, Matt, what did you think of this one?
It wasn't nearly as bad as I remembered it being.
Oh, Matt.
Oh my God, this is so
unusual.
Yeah, you're so positive. Like, usually this is the other way around for you guys. This is hilarious.
But it was a very bad film. I saw this in the cinema.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I didn't remember anything about it. And I realised watching it back that the reason I didn't remember anything about it, I probably couldn't see anything that was going on in the cinema. It's not just, you're not joking and you're not exaggerating, Mike. It's genuinely very difficult to see what's going on most of the way through the film.
I couldn't comprehend anything that was happening. And even at the beginning, I even tweeted this when I was about 20 minutes in, when I was like, why does this film look so weird? Because in the first sort of act of the film, it takes place in the daylight. But even then, everything looks very strange. Like, it's maybe all shot on a green screen, or the colour grading is off. And then from about half an hour in, all the way through to the end, it takes place at night, and you just cannot see anything. And somebody tweeted me saying that apparently they made a decision in post-production to sort of turn down the cut, like the brightness, essentially, and they made all of the blacks darker. I think to make
Snyder.
it feel like more of a... it's very Snyder, isn't it? To make it feel like more of a horror film. And because of that, you literally can't see anything. And honestly, the color balance... I mean, like, there's a guy that's wearing a black jacket because he's a cop. And when he was sat in front of a black background, he just disappeared on my telly. Like, you could just see a dimly lit face, and that was it. I was like, this is... absolutely terrible.
It's like they Googled how to make a film scarier, and like the top result was make it darker.
Were there any redeeming qualities in it? Like, did you guys see anything?
I thought the plot was genuinely exactly what you want from an Alien versus Predator film. Because like my biggest problem with Alien versus Predator was that I liked the farming aliens concept, but I really didn't like how complicated that got with the ancient alien stuff, and the predators are gods and they influenced all culture. I didn't like that stuff. And then Requiem kind of delivers what I was kind of expecting and wanting from an Alien vs. Predator film, which is just aliens and predators fighting with totally expendable humans with absolutely no personality.
Yes.
But it's badly made. It's incredibly badly made. That's the problem with this. I think the plot's fine, thin as it is.
I guess so.
I don't want this kind of film set on Earth. I want it set on like a remote planet or something. So it's like they're stuck there, and that's what makes it scary. There's no escape. You're stuck in this scenario and you can't get out, and you're not going to radio for help from anyone, and you're just in the middle of it. I think that's what I kind of wanted.
No.
And then having it here on Earth,
where you can drop a nuke on it to end the story.
Yeah. I think that's what they needed to do by the end of it.
Oh my god, just drop a nuke on this film. But yeah, like it's true. Like weirdly, yeah, like we talked about how the first AVP kind of felt more action adventure sci-fi than horror. This one, they've gone for something completely different, right? And I suppose this is the one positive thing I could say about this movie, is that at least it's, once again, like all of the Alien films, this is something you can respect about all of them, I think, in their own way, is that they're all trying to do their own thing, right? Whether it's Cameron's action war movie, or it's Fincher's kind of prison drama, or it's Jean-Pierre Jeunet's kind of bonkers space opera, or it's Paul W.S. Anderson's kind of video game Tomb Raider, adventure movie. This is a kind of, it's like a kind of monsters invading a small town horror movie, isn't it? Like The Blob or War of the Worlds or something, like a little American town gets invaded by aliens and attacked by monsters. It's kind of a little bit like the last act of Jurassic Park when the T-Rex is loose on San Diego. It's going for that kind of a slightly old school monster movie vibe, I suppose, which is interesting in its attempt to do something different. It's just so terrible at doing it.
Well, I think that like the Predator Alien, I was saying before that like the sequels from Cameron onwards did this thing of like developing the alien in a new way, like biologically. And this, the Predator Alien fits within that context.
Yeah.
It's a bit weird because it goes away from the horror in that regard, and it becomes more sci-fi because we're kind of, the audience are like invited to be, I guess, like anthropologists of the Xenomorph, because every time you're shown a different thing and you're asked to understand why the Xenomorph has become this thing and that there are rational reasons for that, you're invited to break down the science of that, and you can do that with the alien Predator. Unfortunately, in this film, because you're invited to look at things that way, when the Predator alien starts like laying not even eggs but like live aliens into a woman, it's just like, well, that doesn't fit with anything you've told me in the last 6 movies. I've been following you all this way through the newborn and all of that, but this doesn't track at all.
No, it does not. James, what did you think of the alien predator hybrid thing? The alien with dreadlocks?
Oh, I just wasn't about it. No. But there's a thing, though, with the Predators as well. Like, it becomes a thing later on in the other Predator films. Like, in The Predator, the one in 2018, there's a whole sort of, like, plot about how the Predators are taking, like, the best hunter's DNA and then splicing it with their own. So there's, like, another sort of, like, interesting thing there where the Predators are developing like the aliens are, yet they're not putting DNA from xenomorphs in themselves because it's so dangerous. And then just the idea of this crazy predator alien, I think they made it look very silly as well, didn't they? Like, it's not the best looking version of both of those two creatures.
I don't know, James, I couldn't see it for most of the films, to be honest. I was so happy when any of the predators bled, because I was like, oh, look at that lovely bright green blood, like there's something I can see. But yeah,
he's just got like a predator mouth with a little alien mandible.
Yeah, exactly.
And braids, like, yeah.
Oh, what a terrible film.
What did you guys think of the maternity ward scene? Because, Mike, it was really interesting that you just said that the first one got criticised for not being violent enough. And then in this film, it's got one of the most violent things I've ever seen. What did you guys think of that from a horror point of view in particular?
Yeah, I think it was good, like, again, on paper, because that's what I had heard about this one, that they sort of went, oh, the first one wasn't horrific enough for you, then have some of this for this one. But I think by that point, I was so far removed from enjoying any of it. I was just like, oh, whatever. Because again, it's just, all of these things are kind of cool and scary on paper, but they were just executed, I think, so badly for me that it didn't really hit. I don't know, James, what did you think?
Yeah, exactly the same. It's just, it feels like they've gone, like you said before, it's gone overkill. So it's gone overboard. We're going to have loads more gore. We're going to have this crazy scene. And it's just doing it for the sake of it. There's no sort of like reasoning.
I mean, it's like trying to be transgressive for the sake of being transgressive. It's not. I showed it to my friend. My friend came around. I showed it to him. Like, because I explained the scene to him. He'd never seen the film, and I explained the scene, and that it's like, I think it was quite a controversial scene when it came out. And obviously when I'm describing it to a friend, it sounds like the most awful thing imaginable. But I wasn't that horrified because it is so like you said, it's just shock for the sake of it, that it takes you out of yourself. You're just like, that's ridiculous. That's insane. But yeah, I don't know if it was like, there was also an element of like a child had been told that the series was a horror series with, maternal themes and pregnancy themes. And they were like, yeah, got it. Yeah, I understand completely. And then they did this. That's what it kind of felt like seeing that scene.
It's true. It's kind of interesting that like the series always sort of fits with the times that these movies are made as well. Like that like we've talked a lot on this podcast about how in the 90s a lot of horror movies got a bit kind of, actually movies in general, at least American cinema, got a bit kind of silly and campy, right? The sort of Joel Schumacher era of film, and that's where we had Alien Resurrection, and it feels like it very much fits that vibe of kind of Batman and Robin, Men in Black, like that kind of tone. And then this era in horror cinema was very kind of like dirgy. Like you had the Saw movies, the Hostel movies, and everything was kind of dimly lit. Everything looked a bit like a kind of nu metal music video, or something. And this kind of fits that vibe as well in a way.
Yeah, especially with the directors after you said they did music videos, didn't they?
Yeah, that's it. And it really
that's very interesting though. Like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
It is that it's kind of, you can see the way like horror and genre cinema changes through looking at these movies, but they're some of them at least are particularly bad examples of that, I think. But there you go. Anything else either of you guys want to mention on AVP Requiem?
Put a nuke on it.
Put a nuke on it. Kill it. Absolutely kill it. I will never watch that movie again as long as I live. I rated it on Letterboxd and gave it 0.5 star because it's the lowest I could give it. Hated it, Matt. I hated it. So there you go. That was AVP Requiem. And that was kind of for a while the nail in the coffin of the series. They didn't make any more AVP movies.
Why.
Yeah. They didn't make any more Alien movies until Ridley Scott decided that he wanted to resurrect the series and bring it back to its roots and create a prequel called Prometheus.
These are ancient civilizations that were separated by centuries, and yet this same pictogram was discovered in every one of them. They're smiling.
I think they want us to come and find them.
We're all here because of a map you two kids found in a cave.
Not a map, an invitation.
From whom?
Please tell me you can read that.
Prometheus, are you seeing this?
So Prometheus came out in 2012, and I remember the excitement for this. Do you guys remember the kind of hype and excitement before this movie came out, right? You're both vigorously nodding. This was like, oh my God, Ridley Scott, the guy who made the original Alien film, is finally making a new Alien movie. It's going to bring it back to its roots. This is written by Damon Lindelof, who created Lost and The Leftovers and shows like that, Watchmen as well. And it's got an amazing cast. Noomi Rapace, Michael Fassbender, Guy Pearce, Idris Elba, Logan Marshall Green, Charlize Theron. It's got some amazing people in it. I remember seeing trailers for it and thinking it looked absolutely stunning and beautiful. Let me try and summarize the plot of Prometheus. So this obviously takes place a long time before the original Alien, right? I think at some point towards the end of the 21st century, 2090 or something like that, 2089. And it's essentially about these archaeologists, Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway, who discover a kind of star map written on a cave, like drawn on a cave somewhere in Scotland, I think. And they discover that there are several of these drawings on caves drawn by different ancient cultures and civilizations at different times, but they're all kind of depicting the same thing, this kind of godlike creature in this star and planet formation. And they figure out that it's maybe some kind of map and a way for them to find their creators, like these gods that created humanity. So they go off on this ship funded by Wayland to find them, literally meet their makers, right? They go off on this ship called called Prometheus, and they land on this moon. This map takes them to this moon LV-223, where they want to meet these giant godlike creatures that they call engineers that kind of created humanity. But when they're there, they come across all of these big jars of black goo, and they all get sort of killed off one by these sort of... They're not quite xenomorphs, right? But they're these sort of alien creatures. It's a bit kind of infection horror as well, and all of this other stuff going on. So there's quite a lot, and this movie deals with quite a lot of big themes. We've also got the android here, played by Michael Fassbender, who's quite a major role in this as well, which we can talk about as we go. So, James, were you very excited for this movie when it first came out?
Yeah, obviously, like everyone at the time, I was like, brilliant, a new Alien film. What's it going to be? How are they going to sort of like do a prequel for this? Yeah, and then like I watched it.
Yes. And what did you think?
Well, I think my main issue with this and Covenant, when we get into it, is they're putting on too much exposition. And Alien, for me, the beauty of the aliens themselves is that they are unknowable. Mm-hmm. You don't know what they're going to do. You don't know where they've come from. They're just this perfect killing machine that's just been created. And then suddenly Ridley Scott has had all this time to think up a backstory for the alien. And he's been thinking about it. And then finally he's getting a chance to do his film. And it's packed with so much like stuff about how these aliens were created, and a lot of it is just very convoluted as well. I mean,
I have so many questions.
Yeah, I mean, let's just talk about the opening scene then. So what do you guys think is happening in that opening scene with the engineer drinking the black goo and then falling into the river?
This is, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, is this a scene that kind of depicts the genesis of us, like the birth of humanity? Is that what you made of it?
Yeah, the characters are right. The archaeologist characters are right in their assumption. The engineers, they call them the engineers because they engineered life on Earth. Mm-hmm. The engineers have the technology to rewrite DNA, alter DNA, and create life through that alteration of DNA. Mm-hmm. And the black goo is the representation, the visual, what that looks like, that device that they have manifests as a black goop.
Yes.
So what they're doing is deconstructing that one specific engineer's DNA on the planet Earth, and it gives rise to all life. And then later in the film, that same technology has been used as a biological weapon, or planned for use as a biological weapon.
Mm-hmm. So Matt, I don't know where to. I literally don't know where to start with this movie. But
I mean, that was a great first opening explanation.
Do you know what? I know that because I've watched this film 4 times now, and I said earlier, I've given this film so many chances, and it is incredibly convoluted, James. You're absolutely right, and I really dislike. That's what I primarily disliked about it the first time I saw it. And it's also the reason why I've kept coming back to it. And it's so beautiful. Like you said, Mike, it's stunning.
Yeah, it does look beautiful.
It's one of the most beautiful looking films I've ever watched, let alone definitely. In the Alien series. Yeah.
So I just kept feeling like I just don't get it. Like there's something here and I'm not getting it. And I've come back to it time and time again. And now I'm able to tell you that about the black goop because I've watched it so many times. And all the convoluted stuff, I understand it. I've wrapped my head around it. And I still don't like the film. It's not that. That's not the problem I have with it. It's answering a load of questions that nobody asked. Like, who cares about anything?
Is this the kind of Phantom Menace kind of midichlorian kind of film, isn't it, in a way? I think you're absolutely right. And you're so right, James, with what you said about the exposition. I mean, do you remember back in the day when characters in the Alien films just talked like people kind of thing? Like they were space truckers or they were Marines who just bantered and talked like people talk to each other. Whereas in this film, it's so much characters explaining the plot to each other, isn't it? And explaining these different theories and big philosophical ideas. Things that the film itself should be touching upon, but we don't actually need characters explaining to us. Like, one of my favourite moments of dialogue is the moment when Shaw and her boyfriend, Charlie, are talking about creating life and what it means to create life and where, does God exist? And he says, it just turns out that anyone can create life. And then she starts crying and she goes, I can't have children. And then it gets into this big emotional, moment, and then they immediately have sex. And of course, when they have sex, that is when she's impregnated with an alien, and everything just feels so kind of contrived and forced about it,
Guess you can take your father's cross off now.
Why would I want to do that?
Because they made us.
And who made them?
Well, exactly. We'll never know. But here's what we do know. Is that there is nothing special about the creation of life. Right? Anybody can do it. I mean, all you need is a dash of DNA and half a brain. Right?
I can't create life. What does that say about me?
That's an amazing moment of that when she says that, just to declare that they've got problems conceiving for the audience. There's another even better moment, which is when Idris Elba just bursts into a room and goes, "It's a military facility." Yes. And there's been absolutely no build up to his realization that it's a weapon, it's a biological weapon. And even the first time I saw it, I was like, I didn't take that as a fact, because I literally didn't understand how he could possibly know that in the context of the film.
Yeah.
He just bursts in and says it, but that is a fact. That is what's happening. Covenant kind of confirms all of that stuff. But yeah, he just bursts in and expositions into the room and says that line.
Yeah, even in terms of themes and stuff, you were talking about sort of giving birth and making new life. That's also in the whole stuff with David and Wayland.
Yes.
It's the AI kind of theme, isn't it? Where you're creating life, and that's mirroring what the engineers have done. So they've got this, but they've got it in 3 different dimensions with different characters and how they relate. But it just seems like they don't quite mesh, do they? Because it could be a really strong, maybe AI story in there, or it could be a really strong sort of bit with the woman who can't have kids, and then mirroring that with sort of the engineer. There's just so much going on, isn't there, all the time?
And it's always been a theme throughout this entire franchise, right? This idea of mothering and giving birth and all of that kind of thing. But in theory, right, this should be a really interesting kind of plot that all of us would love. I mean, in some ways, we keep talking about how each movie, the kind of push-pull between, is it an action movie, is it sci-fi, is it horror? I don't know what you guys think, but I think in some ways this is the most sci-fi of the Alien franchise, isn't it? It's so much about this idea of where do we come from, what makes us human, why are we here, and those themes that get explored really cleverly in anything from kind of Ex Machina to Battlestar Galactica. This idea of using kind of androids or cyborgs or whatever to kind of think about creation and where we come from and all of that kind of thing. That's all there, isn't it, Matt, in a way? It's just not executed that well.
Well, that's all great sci-fi, and there's a good film here that isn't tied to the movie Alien. And it's very telling that this film is called Prometheus, not Alien Prometheus, whereas the second one is called Alien Covenant, and it is very much more an alien film. Like I said, it's answering questions nobody asked, but that's because we all love this franchise. So we have views on whether those questions should be asked or answered. But if you just made a film that looked this good with this cast and this director, about going into space and finding an alien race that made humans that then decided to destroy humans, that's a great plot. And it's such a shame that it gets tied up in the Xenomorph, Neomorph storyline there.
Well, it feels like Ridley Scott's doing that in Raised by Wolves as well. He's got that kind of AI plot in there. But again, I do worry that that's going to get more and more convoluted, because they've got religious stuff in there and different points like that. So I think he's got so many ideas. Sometimes they just all come rushing out. But I mean, this is the guy who's done Blade Runner and the first Alien. If he's got it sort of concise, it works. But this is just... him just kind of like splurging all these ideas which no one really like necessarily wanted for an Alien film.
I know. And let's talk about the alien element of it then, because we get all of these different types of monsters. And again, like in theory, some of them are quite cool, and some of these visuals and these set pieces are quite cool, right? We've got the goop that comes out of the vase that attacks people, jumps into their faces. We've got the kind of squid creature that comes out of Elizabeth Shaw that she has to kind of self-abort. We get the sort of early version of a xenomorph in the very last moment, right?
Like Neomorph,
exactly. Matt, what did you think of that, of the portrayal of the monsters, I suppose, in this film?
I think that some of the designs are really cool, definitely, and it works for the more horror elements. There's some cool zombie stuff in this film.
Yes, well, that's the other thing, right? It turns people into these weird zombie things. Yeah.
But it's all, for me, too tied up in the alien stuff. It's too... You go into the film the first time you see it knowing it's a prequel and expecting it to get somewhere towards Alien.
Yes.
And that gets in the way of enjoying any of those monsters, I think. Just on its own, the really big squid that comes out of shore and attacks the engineer at the end is amazing. It's like an absolute nightmare starfish, isn't it? It's so scary. And the way that, like, the struggle between the engineer and that thing is really, really good, because you know how strong the engineer is, and he's like just fighting for his life. It's a really great moment. And it goes along with all the great creature design in the film, which is, Ridley Scott knows how to get a team together to produce that kind of thing. But it's too tied up in the mythology to be enjoyable for me.
Yeah, I mean, that abortion scene, right, James, is pretty great, isn't it? And just from a horror perspective, like, that is a well done kind of set piece in this mess of a movie, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And it's got moments like that which sort of like take you back to the original Aliens, because Ridley Scott can do that, but then, like Matt was saying, there's so much of it where you're constantly going, oh, is this that bit from the first Alien? How's that going to link in with this? Like, when you see the engineer in the pilot seat, when you see him without his helmet, like, the joy of that when you first watch it is this weird sort of giant creature with this weird elephant trunk like helmet. It looks very sort of weird, but then explaining that it's just this big guy who's an alien in a helmet, it's just like, it takes away the mystery. And that's the thing, like, when it's got the mysterious elements and the suspense, that's all the horror stuff, and that's when it sort of like gets back to its roots. But yeah, there's only you do get a few glimpses of it, and like Matt was saying with the zombie stuff and like all of that, it's in there, but it's just in there not enough.
Yeah, because I guess as well we should say, right, that the what you kind of assume this film is eventually leading to is the moment in the first Alien movie, which is a very fleeting moment where they go into that spaceship on LV-426, and there is the space jockey, right, the famous space jockey that was never explained, the giant guy, like you said, James, with the elephant trunk type of face, who's got the rib cage that's like something's burst out of it, and we never found out exactly how that ship got there and how that alien ended up on there laying eggs or whatever. And so you kind of assume that this movie is going to explain that or start to explain that. But again, it's like, it doesn't really, does it? And I guess we've still got to talk about Covenant as well. And I think the idea was there was going to be a third one, but it's really kind of taking its time to get to that point where you kind of think, how does this connect the dots,
Do you want to hear my list of things that human characters do that are incredibly stupid in Prometheus?
Please.
It's a 6-point list that I kept while watching the film.
Yes.
In chronological order as they happen in the film.
This is the content I want.
Holloway gets a reading that the air is clean enough to breathe, so all of the characters take their helmets off.
Oh, and we haven't even got to Alien Covenant yet, but oh my God. Yeah.
They recover the severed engineer head, and then they stick electric prods in it to reanimate it.
That bit's hilarious.
When David and Holloway are talking when Holloway's drunk, and David says, "How would you feel if you met your makers?" and they said they just made you because they could. And he basically just like laughs it off. And I got really hung up on the idea that this scientist who was studying this possibility of aliens creating human life had never in his years of study pondered the possibility that they just did it because they could. He's a scientist. Very annoying. Fifield, who is terrified of being trapped in the structure overnight, smokes weed.
Oh. Is he the geologist?
He is,
whatever?
yeah.
The one that goes, I'm geologist, I like rocks, I love rocks.
Yeah, that three-dimensional character we all love.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Okay. 5 of 6. Minutes after Fifield smokes weed, Milburn sees an alien that looks exactly like a cobra, that is rearing its head exactly like a cobra would, and he reaches out and he tries to stroke it, and he says, "Come here, darling," or whatever, like it's a cat, like me when I see a cat in the street. And then finally, absolutely classic, right at the end of the film, Shaw and Vickers are trying to run away from the horseshoe-shaped spaceship that is rolling like a big ring. And they run in a straight line instead of sideways.
Absolute classic.
I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that it's not going to be that simple, and they're very panicked, but it looks like a scene out of Looney Tunes when they're doing that.
It does. It's the moment everyone remembers from that film that they don't just jump to the side. Because also the thing is, Shaw does jump to the side eventually when she's about to be crushed. It's like, oh, so you did remember to do that then. And then, poor Charlize Theron's character still doesn't. But yeah, a strong list, Matt. A very strong list. And actually, before we move on, can we just quickly try and just break down the origins of the species here, because this is something that this movie kind of tries to explain, and you sent me a really handy little graphic, Matt, on WhatsApp last night, which kind of helped. But the different combinations of what happens when different people react with goo / aliens / space jockey god engineer type people, right? There's all different things that happen, but are we kind of invited to believe that the xenomorph happens because the goo gets into the male character who has sex with the female character who gives birth to the squid who face jumps onto the engineer, and then it bursts out of the engineer's chest at the end? Is that right?
I've watched this 4 times. I'm pretty sure I've got it, but I don't know. James, do you want to go?
I mean, I just have no idea at all.
So,
Mike, sounds right. I like your confidence. Let's go with that. I know there's lots of other stuff that happens in the next film, lots of tinkering, but yeah.
Mike, you're pretty much right, but it's not a xenomorph, it's a neomorph. The xenomorph is exactly the same process. Well, no, it's not the same process. We're going to see the xenomorph, and it's David's 10 years of genetic tinkering. But yeah, you've got like I said, you've got this technology that can rewrite DNA, and they mostly use it for faffing around creating humanity on other planets.
Right.
And then for reasons undisclosed, they have decided to use the same technology to destroy humanity.
Yes.
Or just use it as a weapon. This is another thing that's very unclear. Characters in the film state that they have decided to kill all humans, but I don't know where any character gets that from. You just have to take it as like verbatim just because they say so, basically. But so they've decided to do that. So some of the engineers tinker with that technology and turn it into this quite volatile biological weapon that does do the process you just described. Mm-hmm. But primarily it just turns people into zombies. But then you get the whole sexual element and passing that infection on, and I think it's just incredibly volatile, and it just changes DNA very rapidly and with a lot of volatility, and that's how you get down that chain that you just described to the neomorph at the end of the film. Yes,
because also when the engineer drinks it and falls into water, it creates humans. So there's all kinds of things that black goo does.
And have you seen the X-Files? Because there's black goo in that. Is that the same black goo?
Oh my God, maybe this is what it's all heading towards, a big crossover universe. Do Disney own the X-Files now? They probably do.
It's on Disney Plus.
There you go. It could happen. It could actually happen. So there you go. Well, we can continue this conversation now with the next film, because some of this gets expanded on in the next film. So last but not least then, we're nearly there. This is the 6th and final to date Alien movie in the franchise. This is Alien Covenant.
Covenant, do you read me? Covenant, come in. you right now. I need you.
Okay, baby, just calm down, sweetheart. Calm down.
Tell me to calm down.
You're breaking up.
All of this to start our new life.
James, do you want to do the honours of giving us the little plot synopsis of Alien
Oh, I
Covenant?
can try. So you've got a colony on a spaceship. They're getting ready to colonise a new planet. They're going along their merry way, and then they hear some sort of distress call from a planet which just so happens to be perfect for them. So they go, okay, we'll pop down here. So they take their, they go and have a look and see what's going on. And then they find that there's a guy there, and it just so happens to be David, the android from the previous film. And then lots of stuff happens. There's aliens, and it all gets a bit crazy with the exposition and explanation for why the aliens exist.
It's so true. Now, this one, like you mentioned, Matt, you know, the fact that Prometheus didn't have the word alien at all in its title, the only film in the series that didn't. And with this one, they've gone very much back to, okay, this is an alien film again, right? Alien Covenant. What did you think of this one, and how did it compare to Prometheus for you?
Well, I again, much better than I thought I was going to find it. Very, very pleasantly surprised. I've been that way with all of them, like apart from Prometheus.
Was it just because you had such low expectations?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I saw this in the cinema. I remember you actually convinced me to see it because I was like, no, I'm not going to see that. Prometheus is rubbish. I don't want to see that. And you were like, no, it's good. It's like a pretty good horror film. And I went, and I was really mad at you. Yeah.
Sorry.
I was really annoyed, but because I hated it. But watching it back last night, I was, more than pleasantly surprised. I thought it was decent. We didn't really talk much about Fassbender in Prometheus there. He's obviously the best thing about Prometheus.
Oh, really good.
And they're literally doubling down on that fact by letting him play
nice.
two characters who kiss each other. It's brilliant.
Amazing.
He's so good in this. And I don't know, getting back to the Xenomorph and the explanation. I don't like it, and like I said, it's answering questions nobody asked and I didn't want answered, but it's kind of like, well, we're in it now. You've done Prometheus, so I'm angry at Prometheus, but I won't carry that anger into this film. So I accept that you're gonna do a load of silly stuff with the creation of the Xenomorphs, and yeah, I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah, James, what about you? What did you think of Alien Covenant?
Yeah.
After I told everyone back in 2016 that it was worth a watch.
I only saw it this year when I was rewatching all of the films. So I sort of didn't really know what to expect. I think, again, my main issue is that it's explaining stuff that I didn't really want explained. I didn't want to know where the Xenomorphs came from necessarily. I just wanted to accept they were just something that existed. And it goes into such depth as to why they've been created. And the fact that it's David, who's an android, who basically creates the Xenomorphs from splicing them together and trying to make the perfect one out of all these different combinations. I just didn't like that at all, because then it doesn't become otherworldly. It becomes something which, like a robot's made.
Yeah, suddenly we're in mad scientist Frankenstein almost kind of story, aren't we? Which essentially this movie is, this kind of guy who wants to play God and create his own creatures, essentially. Yeah, and you're right, that's a very different film to what we got in the old days with the aliens.
Yeah, and I think I'm all for films like that, but I think that takes away the scariness of these creatures, because once you start explaining where they came from, because the whole reason they're scary is because they're otherworldly and you can't explain them. They could be anywhere. They're mysterious. It's unknown. That's what's the horror element in this. But then you go, okay, it's actually man-made. You put a different kind of spin on it. Well, not man-made, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's just sort of it doesn't quite sit right with me.
Yeah, I kind of know what you mean. And I did really enjoy this when I first watched it. And I've gone the other way because I rewatched it this week and thought, oh, it's not very good, actually. But I think what I was really pleased about when I watched it, first time round at a press screening with considerable amounts of alcohol, which maybe helped, but it just felt a bit more like a fun alien film more than Prometheus did, which was trying to be so profound and everything else. And I kind of, again, in theory, it's kind of interesting, this idea of kind of these engineers create man creates this robot destroys the engineers, robot creates aliens destroy man. Like, there's all these kind of fun things that they're sort of trying to set up with this, aren't they? But
what's that? That sounded like something from a film, and then it goes, "Woman inherits the earth."
Yeah, I was being Jeff Goldblum. Yeah, and it does feel a bit Jurassic Park-esque at times, I think, this, or at least Lost World-esque, when they're sort of running around in the tall grass.
Yeah, they're in the jungle, aren't they? Yeah.
I think it's very funny as well that David kills all the engineers, like, just on sight, because we talked about how it's a bit of a troll on the audience to have Ripley forget Newt entirely. It's a massive troll on the audience to build up the engineers for the entirety of Prometheus. Yes. And then in a flashback scene just show that David killed every single one of them as soon as he arrived on the planet. You're never going to get any answers on that.
Well, I almost wonder if it's almost the opposite of trolling, and that it felt a bit like an audience appeasement, that everyone hated the engineers in Prometheus and everyone hated that there weren't enough aliens. And this movie, it's like, right, we're putting alien back in the title. We're literally wiping out all the engineers. I'm going to give you some alien horror again, I wonder, but yeah.
So are the aliens that we see at the end of this film, this is the thing that I'm still not 100% sure on, are they fully formed xenomorphs? David refers to it as a perfect organism, which is obviously the quote from Ash. I think Ash says that in the first film, doesn't he?
Yes.
I think a few characters refer to it as the perfect organism. When I first saw it, I didn't think they were xenomorphs. I think we were just doing more splicing, but it was re-watching it yesterday when, with that line, the perfect organism, I was like, oh, actually, are we at the end point now? Have we reached xenomorphs again? What do you think?
Let me tell you, Matt, it's a protomorph. This is a protomorph. So we're still not yet at xenomorph stage.
What's the difference? The only thing that I did notice as well, that I think is the only difference I saw, is the chest burster looks very different. The chest burster is a small alien rather than like a scary worm penis. It's a fully formed little fella. But apart from that, to me they looked identical. The face huggers looked identical.
It's just you saying penis and then saying little fella.
Little fella. I think it's kind of smaller and grayer, a bit less sort of metallic and a bit less shiny. I don't know, there is something about it that looks marginally different, but it's almost like with each one we're getting nearer and nearer it, aren't we? But I think, again, I don't think it's ever going to happen now, but I think the plan was that there was going to be one more film where we finally get to Xenomorph.
But then how? Because they just go flying off in the ship again, doesn't he? So David takes the ship.
But he's got facehugger embryos in the Covenant.
Yeah. So he's going to take it somewhere, and then it's going to end up crashing back on the same planet where it was originally.
Well, no, because this is what I don't understand, because he's wiped out all of the engineers, but at some point an alien had to get back inside an engineer in one of those ships in order for it to crash land on LV-426, for that space jockey to be dead with its chest bursted open and a whole load of eggs to be in the basement of that ship. But God knows. God knows what Ridley Scott's plan was.
We haven't seen the last of the engineers then, have we?
No.
Unless that's... well, now we know that the space jockey's face is actually a helmet. That doesn't need... Well, does it need to be?
Well, it's so big. It's
but
giant,
they've shown like exactly that scene in Prometheus, haven't they? Where you see the space jockey.
Well, yeah, but it's just sitting in a bit of equipment on a ship.
Yeah, exactly. In the same pose though, and everything.
Yeah, but any space jockey piloting a ship would presumably look like that, right?
It just seems like too much, doesn't it?
Yeah, because we haven't yet been on LV-426.
Exactly,
they haven't been to that moon yet, and it's got to be a queen that would come out of the space jockey, because then it lays all of those hundreds of eggs, which is what John Hurt stumbles into in the first Alien film, right?
But David creates eggs now, and Ridley Scott didn't like the alien queen, did he? So I don't know if we're going to see, if they do ever do any more. I think we haven't seen the last of the engineers. There has to be an engineer landing on LV-426, but I don't know if we're going to see an alien queen. I don't know if they're going to make any more movies in this series.
I think sadly, I don't know, but because this movie didn't do very well, I think that's it. That we're not going to get that final chapter that connects the dots.
I would quite like just an answer, though.
Yeah,
as much as I don't need the answers, like in general, I just want okay, so that's what you were planning all along. Now I can still hate it, or I can be like, okay, so at least you put a pin in it.
We need our Revenge of the Sith, don't we? Like, we need something. It is quite annoying.
Yeah, we're in it now. Finish it off. Yeah,
I'm sure Disney Plus will create a series at some point, won't they? But yeah, so that is all still up in the air in terms of the actual mythology and how it connects. But what about all the other stuff? What did you think of our crew of characters in this? We've got, Danny McBride, and again we've got Michael Fassbender back and Billy Crudup and all these again very like disposable crew, haven't we, that crash land on this planet? James, what did you think of this bunch of characters?
It was kind of like going back to the roots a bit, wasn't it? In terms of like, we've got a bunch of colonists, they're there, we're going to put them on a planet, there's going to be things that are going to get them. I liked all of that, and sort of like them finding out kind of what this planet was about and just hiding away, and then all these things happening. So I like that element to it. But again, there's so much other stuff on top.
Mm-hmm. Matt, what did you think about their decision to land on this planet and immediately take off their helmets and just breathe everything in as soon as they get there?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't keep a list in this one because, to be fair, I think there's less genuinely stupid decisions than in Prometheus, but the colossally stupid decision of steering your 7-year, 2,000 plus souls journey off course to just have a look at the planet. It's just monumentally silly. I know it's set in the future, but you've got to believe that like an Ark ship, the work that had gone into plotting the course and deciding on the planet, it would have been like years of work. Like, we've got the perfect planet. Like, you can't just be like, we'll just pop down and have a look, it might be all right. You don't know what untold horrors are on this planet, and they do find out. Obviously, it's monumentally stupid work there from Captain Oram.
Ridiculous. And I think Ridley Scott is far more interested, right, in Michael Fassbender's characters in this movie. This is a movie that's much more interested in these two androids, isn't it? James, what did you think of the two Michael Fassbenders in this and their very homoerotic relationship that they have?
I think that was I enjoyed all of that stuff. The David and Walter, because they're kind of like they're different versions of the androids we've seen in the other films in terms of their personalities. So David's very much like Ash, isn't he? Down to Ash and him say the same thing about the xenomorphs, polymorphs, whatever they are in this film.
Yeah.
So they're sort of like, there's a very sort of like, there's a kinship between those guys. And then Walter is more like Bishop because he's kind of a bit more sensitive and he's there to protect the other colonists. So it's quite interesting seeing these two different versions of androids and the sort of like how they clash. So I really enjoyed all of that. And also because David is made to be like Wayland's son as well. So he's got all of those personality traits almost from Wayland, because we didn't even talk about the fact that he's in Prometheus trying to live forever. Yes. Old Guy Pearce just turns up all old in the ship. So it's like all of this like stuff which sort of like adds depth to it and makes those characters, they're fleshed out, whereas a lot of the other characters are just sort of, they're there just to get killed or have a little bit of backstory. Like, is this the one where James Franco pops up in a video as well? Like rock climbing, just randomly.
He literally dies in like the opening, doesn't he? Because the solar flare or whatever kind of burns up a load of the ship and he dies right at the beginning there. But yeah. I mean, it does feel like that. Like most of the crew are kind of fodder, aren't they? But Matt, did you enjoy the Fassbenders in this movie?
I love the Fassbenders. And actually James making the connections there with Ash and Bishop makes me think that like, I think that's actually what I like so much about this film, coming back to it. It's quite lazy filmmaking, but they're just plucking elements of the classic films and placing them into this. You've got Ash, you've got Bishop. What if Ash and Bishop met and kissed?
Yes.
And then
or played the flute together, where one went, "You blow, I'll do the fingering."
I'll do the fingering. There's Ridley Scott saying there's no subtext in my films.
Incredible.
And you've got Daniels as well. I really like Daniels, but Daniels is pretty much a carbon copy of Ripley, right? She's quite level-headed, she's very likeable, calm in an emergency, and becomes quite an action hero by the end. Just total rip-off of Ripley, but it's enjoyable, it's good to watch.
Even the story, right, that they're on course, but they hear a distress signal, so they go off course. And I mean, it really, like you say, it really is kind of bringing us back to the origins with this one. Yeah.
And to be honest, if they took even more from Alien, instead of Oram saying, let's go and have a look and see if it's nice, if they used the whole, we work for Wayland Industries, it's in our contract, we must go and investigate the signal. You know, they should have lifted more, to be honest, just to like smooth over some of the cracks there.
So there you go. And then we get this kind of reveal. Let's just briefly talk about the monsters themselves. I mean, like you say, this reveal, right, that Michael Fassbender has been, that David has been kind of tinkering away and playing with this DNA goop and creating these different aliens. What did you think of that, James? He's got that like workshop, hasn't he, with all of his sketches and his different things in jars, and he's kind of created a face hugger and the eggs and all of that stuff. Yeah. How did you find all that?
He's put the woman from the last film in, like, she was the host, wasn't she? Like, there's that horrendous bit when you see that. Like, I thought that bit was all right. Like, I don't really need it. He's just obviously very bored, so he's just tinkering around. He's killed everyone on the planet, so he's got to make some, like, scary friends. Yeah. It's just, I mean, yeah, again, too much explanation, but I like I can see where they were going with it, and it does look quite cool when you go into the room and you see all these diagrams and stuff that he's made on this paper which he's found somewhere or made. Like, how's he making all that stuff? Like, where's all that come from? I suppose it's the civilization. But again, there's so many questions in this film which aren't answered or attempted to be answered.
I know, right? And Matt, all those moments when he's like sort of trying to sort of tame the aliens, there's that moment when he comes kind of face to face with a protomorph or whatever it's called, and he's trying to sort of develop a relationship with them, isn't he? And all that kind of thing. Again, for me, that kind of a little bit takes away the scariness. It's a little bit like the Jurassic World films making the velociraptors friendly, you know? I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah, totally. The scares have gone at this point, but for Fassbender, for David, I think it still works. It's still very interesting and it's fun to watch. But yeah, you can't stand in front of an alien in an alien film and just sort of like gaze into its eyes. I suppose Sigourney does it in the third and fourth one. Yeah.
Only Sigourney can do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there you go. Well, that's it. I mean, there's probably so much more we could say about especially those last two movies. Like, there's so much going on, isn't there? But we'll wrap it up there. I want to finish by asking you guys, and we'll talk a little bit about maybe the future of the franchise in a minute as well. But let me start off by asking you guys, I want your rankings. I want to know how you're going to rank the Alien saga from beginning to end, and we're going to include Alien and Aliens in this.
Curveball.
Yeah. Matt, I'm going to ask you first while I write mine.
So, number one with a bullet, Aliens, James Cameron's sci-fi action horror masterpiece. The best sci-fi action horror film ever, and one of the best of each of those subset genres as well.
Yeah.
And then obviously Alien, brilliant film. Onto the sequels. I got to go Alien 3. I really liked it as my number 3. Resurrection after that, I think. And then I think I'm going to say AVP as the fifth best one. On the grounds
James is livid.
On the grounds, and it's close with my number 6, but on the grounds that I would sooner watch AVP than any of the remaining ones on my list.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after that, Covenant, for similar reasons, I would watch it again. I thought it was decent. And then after that, second to last, Prometheus. I was considering putting it last, but we've got to be reasonable here, haven't we? Bottom of the pile, AVPR. Aliens vs Predator Requiem, a truly crap film.
You've got to put the one that is barely a film on the bottom, surely.
So wait, so it goes Prometheus, AVPR?
Yeah, Prometheus is...
So like a beautiful looking film and the worst looking film we've
But looking bad, put AVPR at the bottom, but looking good was not enough to put Prometheus any further up for me.
Fair enough. James, give us your rankings.
Okay, so number 1 is Aliens. Sci-fi action, more aliens, fantastic, everything that I want. Alien, classic, got to be there.
Yeah.
Next, I'm going to put Alien Resurrection, just because it's so mad, so off the wall, and it's just crazy. I love that film. Alien 3 next, because I really enjoyed that one. Then I would put, based on the Fassbender kiss and just their entire dynamic through the film, I'd say Alien Covenant next. Then I would put Prometheus, because it looks really good. That's about it. Next is the worst film I've ever seen by Paul W.S. Anderson, Alien vs. Predator. Terrible film. And yeah, just at the very bottom is Alien vs. Predator Requiem, which we need to drop a nuke on.
Yes. Very good. I think I'm closer to James's list than Matt, but I'm gonna be different to both of you, and this is very on brand for you two as sci-fi people and me as the horror person. But I'm putting, of course, Alien at number 1, and then Aliens at number 2. Third place, I'm going to go Alien Resurrection, because for me it is, I was trying to think of, like you said, Matt, the ones that I'm likely to want to watch again, and it's definitely the movie of the rest of the sequels I've watched the most, because it's the most fun and it's stupid and it kind of is the film it wants to be. Then I've gone Alien Covenant, because, you know, it's got lots of kind of gross body horror, and it's got Michael Fassbender playing the flute with Michael Fassbender. Then I've gone with Alien 3, the assembly cut, which I think is, again, like I said earlier, like a kind of 50% great film, 50% terrible film. Then Prometheus looks beautiful, but that's literally it. And then AVP, Paul W.S. Anderson's AVP, which is stupid but kind of at least watchable. And then, of course, AVP Requiem, which is, like I said earlier, one of the legit worst movies I've ever seen in my life.
What a film.
Who knew that one franchise could have such a such a spectrum, right? It is pretty impressive.
I mean, all big franchises run that gamut at some point, don't they?
Yeah.
I'm thinking, you're saying that's the worst film you've ever seen. I mean, I know for a fact you've seen Freddy's Dead.
Yeah, and Freddy's Dead I used to always cite as one of the worst movies I've ever seen, but then since then I've seen so many worse films, actually. Some of the Hellraiser sequels are worse, and and AVP Requiem is worse. Yeah, so there you go.
Another one today to add to that.
Yeah, add to the list of movies roster. Worse than Freddy's Dead. Yeah, it's so true. And let's just finish off by talking a little bit about what we think might happen next in the Alien universe. Like we said, I think the films are dead after Alien Covenant. I think Ridley Scott is not making any more. But there have been rumours, or I think confirmations, right, that Disney Plus/Fox are kind of resurrecting Alien and doing something in television form. Matt, how do you feel about that?
I mean, I'll definitely watch it. It's Noah Hawley's attached to it, isn't he? And he's got fairly good form for good TV series. So...
Creator of Fargo, right?
Yeah,
the Fargo TV series.
And I trust him. I think that you can do something interesting with that. I don't know. I mean, I wonder if it's ever going to happen. It's one of those things where it's at the time of recording, it's like officially announced, but they haven't shot anything yet. I don't know how much they've written. Things fall apart, you know, at that stage very often. But it's Disney, and when they say they're going to put money behind something, they can certainly afford to, and then they follow through, don't they? So
yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing we've definitely seen, right, James, is that Disney, like, you know, look at all of the Marvel TV series that we've been getting. They're actually pretty good quality overall, aren't they? How do you feel about the idea of a new Alien TV show?
Yeah, I mean, Disney can definitely chuck a load of budget at it. And hopefully if they take the time... I'm sure they must have pretty good quality control in terms of things like that now with such a big franchise. At least you'd hope. I mean, they did buy Fox, and then this was originally a Fox thing, so it depends how much was in development before then and how much is going to be sort of like Disney taking ownership, I guess. But I am interested to see what will happen, because one of the main things I'm worried about is if they don't make it R-rated and if they go for something more sort of like... not necessarily family friendly, but more sort of prime time, and how much that will have a knock-on effect on what they're going to do. And are they going to keep it simple? Are they going to do like little stories from different people in like that come across the aliens, or are they going to have some overarching storyline? There's lots of things you can do with it, but I think the core for me will be them going back to the basics and then starting from there and just having a simple little story where the aliens sort of like are slowly introduced. I think that's what they need to do in order to crack it.
Yeah, and I imagine, Matt, do you reckon... I imagine it's going to be a new story, right? I mean, I don't think we're going to see the concluding chapter of Ridley's kind of prequel, story. I don't know, but I imagine it's going to be something entirely different with Xenomorphs. What do you think? Yeah,
we're not going to see that in the TV series. I hope they do. I'm not a huge fan of this prequel series, but like we said before, you started it, just finish it. Just put a third one out and just let him wrap it up. But for the TV stuff, I'm hoping for some real Weyland-Yutani content. That's felt really missing. I think it's more obvious that Sigourney Weaver's missing from the series. But I think that Weyland-Yutani are as important to the early Alien films as Ripley. Like I said earlier, it's their story together make up that trilogy. So yeah, I hope that we get some on Earth Weyland-Yutani plus Xenomorphs carnage.
Do you think if they do that, they'll introduce the whole thing about Blade Runner potentially being part of the whole universe?
I mean, if they own that as well, then of course they will.
But that's been the long-running myth, hasn't it? I'm not sure if it's a myth, but they always go Blade Runner's part of this universe as well, and that's where the androids come from. And yeah, I don't know if it's getting even more convoluted. Maybe Ridley Scott could whack that on as well.
Yeah,
it does feel like Ridley Scott particularly is more interested in the android stuff, the Blade Runner themes of kind of creation and what makes us human than he is the aliens, right? And I think I'm sure if Ridley Scott had his way, that would be what would happen, definitely. So there you go. We'll wrap it up there because we've been talking for 2 hours. But we did cover 6 movies, so there was a lot to get through. Guys, thank you so much. This has been such a joy. And just tell us, Matt, where can people find your podcast and what's going on with your next season? When is that kicking off?
So we are Journey Through Sci-Fi, and in this very app that you're listening to this podcast in, you can probably go into the search bar and find us there. And we're about to start our 5th series. We follow a very similar format to you, Mike. We do different subgenres each series, but looking at sci-fi. And we're going to be doing dystopia films for our series 5. Very exciting.
Oh, love it. James, which dystopia film are you most excited to discuss on your next series?
There's so many great ones. We've got classic 70s ones like Rollerball and Death Race, but then we've also got things like Hunger Games, and then we've got Clockwork Orange and Battle Royale. There's just such a plethora of dystopia films we're going to be covering in the next series. It's going to be a really good one to do.
Amazing. Guys, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Cheers, Mike.
And that's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you one more time to my brilliant guests, Matt and James from Journey Through Sci-Fi. So, we got through a lot of films this week. We had a lot of thoughts about the Alien movies. Now, I would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of the rest of the Alien franchise? Do you have any particular favourites? Any least favourites? Are you in agreement with me, Matt and James, that AVP Requiem is the worst movie in the series, if not the worst movie of all time? Or do you have some different rankings? I would love to hear from you guys. Please do get in touch. The email address is evolutionofhorror@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. And don't forget, there's also a discussion group where you can discuss this week's films and anything else horror related with fellow listeners. That's the Evolution of Horror discussion group, and you can find that on Facebook. If you want to grab yourself an Evolution of Horror t-shirt or hoodie, check out our merch store on our website, evolutionofhorror.com/shop. And you can find all previous episodes and seasons of our podcast on the website, evolutionofhorror.com. If you want to support this podcast and get treated to regular bonus content, then sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/evolutionofhorror. You can find this podcast on all the normal podcast platforms. And if you get a spare minute, I would be hugely grateful if you could drop us a little rating and review on Apple Podcasts, which really helps us get discovered by new listeners. So that's it. We've spent the last 4 weeks discussing Alien and Predator movies, and we're done for now with the Alien and the Predator. It's time to move on to other space cosmic sci-fi horror. And next week is the one you've all been waiting for. Next week is a movie that I've been getting messages about since pretty much the birth of this podcast, with people saying, when are you going to cover this film? I can't keep you waiting any longer, so next week I'm going to be joined by the one and only Jamie Graham to discuss John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982. That's all we'll be discussing, just one movie and one movie only, The Thing, in spoilerific detail. Join us next week for all of this and more on the evolution of horror.